Today's episode of the Silicon Alley podcast is a special one. I sit down with Melissa Pancoast, who is the co-founder, CEO of The Beans, which is a financial wellness product. It's a banking solution that focuses on the caring class. And this is something that Melissa and I talk a lot about in this episode, and really the psychology behind money. But the caring class are teachers, nonprofit workers, nurses, people that focus from a profession perspective on taking care of others. And there's this kind of dichotomy where you tend not to necessarily take care of yourself financially when you're in these positions. And so the product is really focused on this group. And it's really, really interesting, the types of behavioral economics and psychology that's been brought into the product. Melissa and I met at a pitch competition and really connected because of the fact that Ostrich's mission is very much aligned with The Beans, and we have two very complementary products. So it's a really, really fun discussion on the psychology of money, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So without further ado, here is the episode with Melissa Pancoast. Are you interested in growing and scaling your business? Welcome to the Silicon Alley podcast, where you'll hear from entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and top performers on what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll walk away with actionable insights you can apply in your own business and life. Now to William Glass, the CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Melissa, welcome to Silicon Alley podcast. Super excited to have you on today.
Hey, thanks, William. It's good to see you again, and I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. It's great to see you again. And we met a year ago, a little over a year ago now, on AARP, and Empire Startups hosted like a financial wellness pitch, and Ostrich and The Beans are both, focused on financial wellness. And I will tell you that you absolutely crushed the competition. It was the best pitch that I've seen to date. It was the first time that I was in a pitch competition. I'm like, oh wow, this is how it's done.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really kind. But thanks. I will do podcasts at 8:00 in the morning for that any day. Thanks.
Of course. And yeah, you kind of shared a little off the back of that there were some really great outcomes that happened for The Beans, getting into Techstars. So would love just like a little context for the audience on what The Beans is, what you've built, what you're building. So yeah, Melissa, if you could give a little context on The Beans and then who you are, that would be fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks so much, William. So The Beans is automating the finances of a group we call the caring class. And the caring class, though our products are going to work for anybody who earns an income, the caring class are the 40 million teachers, nonprofit workers, government employees, healthcare employees in the country, a huge group of people who are all college educated, super hardworking, backbone of the economy, and generally living in persistent financial stress. So that's who we're focused on. That's what we do. To do it, we combine the science of what works to transform people's financial lives, and we combine that with our own proprietary data models and a smart wallet, which enables that huge group of people to actually make financial progress. I think you also asked who I am.
Yes.
So I'm Melissa. I'm the founder and CEO of The Beans. Before this, I co-founded a venture capital fund called Comet Labs. We invest in artificial intelligence companies. And before that, I led a research team at the University of Oxford that's focused on how people think and feel about their money. And so The Beans is very much the mashup of these things, a deep understanding of how people operate in relationship to their money, and then bringing that to life with advanced technology.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that stood out when I first learned about The Beans is how much of this you've really applied. Like everyone to some degree says that they use, behavioral economics or, psychology, but like not I think to the same level, which I think is really interesting. And I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about that, because it makes sense given your background. Like what's really unique and different about what you all do at The Beans?
I think, to begin with, it starts with a respect for the problem. Like this is the number one cause of stress in the country. And so when we think about the huge amount of resources that are being directed towards mental health in America right now, if the number one cause of that mental health distress is financial stress, like we probably should be taking financial stress very seriously. So that's first, we respect the problem. And then next, we respect that a lot of people have tried to solve this so far and haven't. And that put us on a path to just like start from the very, very bottom. And when I say start from the very bottom, we built our own taxonomy and our own data model. And those are behaviorally engineered down to the language that our audience would use to talk about different transactions. And if you want to talk about like being in the weeds, which, William, we could have a whole podcast. Maybe I should do that sometime, because I feel like it could take a really long time. But the idea there is that the words you use to describe your transactions actually impact how you feel about that transaction. Particularly importantly, if you feel like you even spent any money. And so like, we really want to get that part right, because you need to feel like you spent that money. So, on the one hand, you like can feel that joy, that, like actually soak it in. And then on the other hand, maybe you don't feel the need to spend quite as much elsewhere. So yeah, so from the very bottom, we built our own data model and went up from there. And then the other side of it is that we know that things like financial literacy do not work. Been clearly proven doesn't work. That's scary in a country where we have Financial Literacy Month, right? This is the biggest public health crisis in the country, and we are like really far behind in how we're approaching it.
So you mean like all this legislation that's coming out of like Florida and Georgia and all these other states that are now requiring it?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons behind that. You start with the fact that like the average math education in the US is at about the 4th grade level. Like financial literacy isn't going to solve the problem. If you do teach people financial literacy, it doesn't necessarily stick for a very long time. And the reality is like financial literacy isn't the gap. Knowledge isn't the problem. There's lots going on, but critically how we think and feel about our money really is the thing that's dictating how we're spending it, how we're behaving within the day-to-day. So I'll say after all of that, the other thing is that we really focus on automation, which is that like, yeah, of course we want to change mindsets and behavior, but we realize that like our role as a technology company is to aid execution, right? Once I can show you the right step to take and build a product that makes you feel confident and comfortable in going with us in that direction. Once I automate it, then I've established a habit for you, right? That's a lot easier than trying to berate or shame you into like establishing a habit for a long period of time, like which has, again, also been proven to not work. So yeah, we definitely from soup to nuts have started at the bottom and built a really different approach to this. And it's out of respect, for the problem and how this can actually get solved.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And like all these little nudges, right? The automation that nudges you in the right direction, the way that you describe a transaction that nudges you to think and feel differently about your financial life is really interesting, because it's been shown to work in other areas. And to your point, like about financial literacy,
I love talking to you. I was like, yes, we are both digital health nerds. You're absolutely right. And like, you just think like, okay, well, there are things that are working super well in the sleep space, in the smoking cessation space, in insomnia. Before the Beans and before Comet Labs, I was at a company called Sleepio, which the company is actually called Big Health. They make an app that treats insomnia better than in-person therapy or drugs. Like, isn't that amazing? Yeah. It's incredible. In the UK, you can get a prescription for this app, right? Like that makes me excited. And so you're so wise to like bring that up, because William, the overlap between like how, again, people think and feel about their money and these other like anxiety ridden things, like, maybe challenges around sleep or smoking or weight loss. Like there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Melissa. I mean, like to your point, we know how to do, like, it's not that, like, yes, obviously, like getting into the weeds can get really complex when you get to finances, but like, it's not a knowledge gap, right? Like you spend less than you earn, and like,
oh, do you want to, I'm just gonna, like we're just gonna, because this is fun. I was like, this is fun for me. I'm calling myself a nerd in my own head right now, but shockingly, when you're stressed out about your finances, you have a higher potential. And I'm saying you is like the grand you, a representative sample of the grand you. I really am a nerd. Wow. Okay. So if you're stressed out, you're more likely to spend money on a credit card. And it's like a fascinating concept where when we have financial anxiety, we desire to prove to ourselves that we are secure. And so we buy things, whether we can afford it or not, on our credit cards, which give us lots of fake money to play with. And that is just wild, right? So yeah, there's lots.
Stress shopping is real. That is a real thing. Exactly. So obviously we haven't done a good job in this space right now in terms of like taking in the emotion, which I think is really interesting, right? Because what other how many other banks or financial institutions are like, let's talk about how we feel when it comes to money. It's always like, well, let's optimize every single number or digit, or like, it's very much speaks to that logic side.
Yeah.
But I think what we've discussed, especially when you start to get into stress, like those purchasing decisions aren't made logically, they're made based on the emotions.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, if you could talk a little bit about that. And like,
I always like to say, I mean, this is also sort of a, like, academics like to fight about these things. Academics call people irrational. And I actually believe that people are hyper optimizing. They're just optimizing for things that society hasn't valued. Right. And so again, back to respect, which is like, I'm not going to call our audience irrational. They are solving a problem for themselves, and it might not be yielding the best financial outcome, which, other people would like for them, but it's solving their problem right now. When it is out of alignment with their own desires and best interests is like where it becomes really interesting, and like enabling people to see that and execute on it, right? And so that's the nudges or defaults of like, this is a great next step for you that is achievable. And that's what we use all of our software to figure out for somebody. And then we can do it for you. Like that lifts someone out of this, like out of a place where, they might be like operating on autopilot in a way that's not healthy for them, into a new direction. But yeah, there is a lot here. And I think in addition to just the feelings piece, which is important, and really, I think getting a lot more credit everywhere, right? We're just, I think, becoming more evolved creatures as we like consider this side of our experience in the world and the power of it. The other thing though, is like, we get to talk about values. And I think there's a couple of banks that are doing that now because it's like a vertical brand strategy to be values driven or, values driven investments. For us, the research shows that when you spend in alignment with your personality and values, you get more utility per dollar, which is amazing. And we find that our audience really loves, like again, back to this group we call the caring class, teachers, nonprofit workers, public service employees, healthcare employees, like they really care about being values driven. And so we get to meet that need as well, which is definitely missing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it makes a ton of sense, right? Isn't that why, what was it, the app that, I think it was like a habits app where you could like put money towards a nonprofit and you could either pick one that you supported. So if you failed, Stick. It went to them. Stick. Yeah. And then, but if you put it to one that was like anti, so like, the other political party, right? Like the donation just went to their political party or something.
Exactly.
And like, you're more motivated by making sure that money doesn't go to, that's not in alignment with your values. And that actually is a really great driver to change. So it sounds like
a fun one. Yeah, that was a fun one. I wonder what they're up to now.
So I've looked at it. I mean, they're still operating. Cool. I think they're just a smaller kind of side business for the researchers that ran the company or that started it. So yeah, but they're still going.
Funny, I was talking to a couple of VCs a few months ago, and they were talking about making a shame bot. So like if someone didn't accomplish their to-do list, that it would tweet them out and shame them. And I was like, I know it sounds way less like fun, like a shame bot's hilarious. It's way less fun, but you're actually you're going to get further faster if you use positive reinforcement. And like, that's just like the kind of crazy thing. I think that's where we are as people, is like in this transition from understanding that like there was an old way, and that old way was like shame and the stick, and the new way is the carrot. And positive reinforcement. And I think, each of us are motivated in different ways. But generally speaking, that positive reinforcement like really makes a difference.
Absolutely. Melissa, if people listening to this want to align their values with their finances and their spending, like where do you start? Like, how do you start to get more utility per dollar spent?
Yeah. So this is, and it's funny that the app does like very straightforward. You talked about like the logical side of things. The app is handling that for people, right? You hook in, you connect your bank accounts, we analyze your spending and your earning, and we build a plan for you. And then we start automating parts of that plan. That's what the Beans app is doing. What our community layer is doing, what our content layer is doing, is focusing on these questions. And there's a lot of space for mindfulness, for reflection, for conversations with other people that reveal to you what your priorities are. And I think as far as, things we over and underestimate, like those conversations actually are very, very powerful. And we've gotten a lot of feedback that they have transformed people's approach to their finances and just sort of, I guess, a sense of agency around their money. But we think of it as a form of like really almost radical empowerment. If you think that like these people, our audience, work their tails off to earn this money and they deserve to enjoy it. And that right there is a different point of view. And so once you take that thread and follow it, it opens up a lot of opportunities. But I would say, how do you get someone like the app? We ask what the things are that bring you joy. The app can surface that to you and use positive reinforcement and say like, great job, right? But we really think that the mindset shift is going to happen in that community layer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So kind of related to that, I always like to ask
William, can you hear my kitten meowing in the background?
I cannot.
Okay. I was like, feel free to leave that in there. But if you do hear her, let me know and I will manage the situation.
No, all good.
She would really like to be joining us right now.
She's welcome to. Yeah. I think along those lines, right, there's this idea that I like to think about and talk about and ask people is like your relationship with money. And it's always changing. It obviously depends on your values and the feelings around it. Like we talked a little bit about some of the shame. Are you on autopilot? I'm curious how you would describe your own relationship with money.
Yeah, I have evolved enormously in my own relationship with money. I can remember, there are many pieces to this. I was in New York City working as a teacher, and I got a ticket for jumping a turnstile in the New York subway because I was broke, right? I just was like flat out of money. And like, you want to talk about shame when you're responsible for educating children and you get a ticket for jumping a turnstile in the New York subway. Like I felt terrible about that. And feeling, shame and a sense of defensiveness and privacy around my finances. I think all of that is very different for me now because I appreciate how powerful it is to talk about it. And so I think having studied it and then like lived it in this work for a while, like I'm aware of a lot of things that are, I would say, healthier practices than definitely how I would have described myself in a past life. And that's what we're focused on. I want like Melissa as the teacher, years ago in New York City to not have felt the way that I felt. And then maybe also not to have been so broke that I couldn't afford to get on the subway like that. That's a sad state of affairs. So I would say definite evolution there in terms of like my own feelings around shame in finances. I grew up in a family where we didn't really talk about money very much. And I think that like learning to talk about money inside of my relationship, inside of my marriage now is like really powerful as well. I think my personal relationship is like in every way better, I would say, with finances than it was. But I'm also still a work in progress, right? I'm still learning. And I think, being a venture-backed founder, you got to have like, a risk tolerance as well with your finances, which is questionable as to its level of health, but I'm enjoying it.
I agree with you on that. Yeah, definitely. Definitely when it comes to the financial decision, I don't know that starting a venture-backed company or starting a startup is really the best move in that regard. So you really got to have it align with your values in other ways for it to make financial sense. But I live with a New York City teacher, middle school science teacher, so like amazing. Totally understand where you're coming from and that experience because I've seen it. I've seen it with friends and coworkers and things like that. So it really is a challenge. And that's part of the reason why I really like what the Beans is doing, focusing on this community that is so like the caring class, as you say, that's so focused on giving. Mm-hmm. And, we know that pretty much every profession that you've listed that works there is underserved, right? In terms of their finances, they're underpaid and maybe not always valued the way that the work that they do should be in our society. And that adds a whole nother layer the financial complexity.
It really does. I mean, we find in our audience, it's remarkable, but the desire to put other people first, whether our community is tithing, 10% of their income, and saving 0 to 5, right? And I think tithing is beautiful. I don't want to say don't do that, but I do want to say let's save as much, right? For your future as well, or purchasing things for their own classroom. If you live with a teacher, you see this all the time. I mean, they're buying stuff for their classrooms to decorate them, to outfit them, to supply their students who need things, and it's constantly putting other people first.
I'm really upset that Dollar Tree went out of business, because for science experiments, it was the best place to get affordable materials, and now there's not a Dollar Tree. I'm so appreciative
that you're upset on behalf of teachers. Yeah.
Right? So totally get it. What would you say, we don't always make good decisions, right? We talk, and we kind of hinted it might be some decisions that might have led to being forced to jump over a turnstile as a New York City teacher. But what would you say is one of the, maybe not the dumbest, but a dumb money mistake that you've made?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't really live a life of regrets. I really and truly appreciate all of the mistakes that I've made. I would say, and this is, I bought some GameStop. That was kind of a ridiculous and hilarious thing. And we were caught in that freeze moment. We tried to sell when it was high, and we got blocked by Robinhood. And I was like, this is insane. So that obviously was foolish, right? You don't jump into, it was fun and foolish. And fortunately it was a safe, a safe and foolish thing to do. That definitely is on the list. And I would say, I think that the dumbest thing, how unfun an answer is this, but do I wish that I saved more aggressively when I was just fresh out of school? Because I'm telling you a story about being broke and jumping a turnstile, but I was a fairly financially responsible person. I happened to just, spend down to 0 every month, which most people in the country do. I didn't spend past it. I didn't carry any debt at that point in my life at all. And I, at some point in the early years, got a retirement account because my, the company I was working for, the nonprofit I was working for, opened up 403Bs for us. But what I know today about compound interest, clearly this is the dumbest thing, and it's just for ignorance. I didn't know any better. And so that's the kind of stuff where if I could have been saving in the years from 20 to 30, I would outperform anything I could possibly do at this time. And that's just astounding to me, but also very motivating, because I want to, pass that message on to as many people as I can.
Exactly. Yes. It's part of the inspiration.
What about you, William? What's your dumbest money mistake?
Oh, I've made a few. Definitely, compounding interest. I feel like you could have always done more on that front, but I was pretty good. I maxed out my 401k every year that I could.
Amazing.
And luckily I was in a sales position where I could control my comp. So I was in a better position. I recognize a lot of people aren't in a position where they even earn enough that they have that opportunity. So that was anyway, I got off topic there.
But what was the dumb thing? Not what was all the smart things you did, William?
Dumb thing? Well, so I bought a property in Florida, and there was a hurricane tree that knocked over onto the shed that we had, and there was people going around. Everybody had issues, and there's these random people that were helping people cut up the trees and haul them off. And I looked at the shed and I was like, it probably needs to just be torn down. But they were like, hey, do you want us to rebuild this? And I was like, yeah, why not? If you can rebuild it, they're not licensed contractors, ran away with a bunch of money, and should have known better. Is do a little bit of work, and then, we need more money to go buy supplies. Right. And I was getting receipts and all that stuff, but they just ran off with a couple $1,000s, and I had to still get paid to get the thing removed. So that was dumb.
That is good. That's a hard learned lesson, but it's not going to happen again.
Yeah. So that's one. there's more, but that one has a nice visual element of seeing the tree come down in a
Truly.
shed.
Well, and where in Florida is the house? Because I'm born and raised. I'm from Miami and then grew up in Cocoa Beach area,
Okay.
Merritt Island. If anyone is listening from the Indian River area, from Merritt Island.
So I was Fort Myers. So I was
Okay.
living in Fort Myers, but I actually went to school in Winter Park at Rollins. So like
Wait, did we know
familiar.
this, William? I went to Stetson.
I didn't. I don't think I look at this.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So we went to school like just down the road from each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I want to give you some redemption. I kind of teased some good things that I did financially. What do you think is one of the best financial decisions that you've made, Melissa?
Ooh, best financial decisions that I've made. I think moving to the Bay Area is a surprising statement to make, but is one of the best financial decisions that I've made. I moved. I was in New York, and I love New York. I met incredible friends, and I learned an enormous amount from them. And I think that like, being here in the Bay Area and surrounded by people who are building things has taught me so much. And I think like over time, that's going to be, that is going to pay dividends. I think, and this is unpopular because student loans are horrific. But I think getting an education is the smartest thing that I did, and like that lots of wonderful people are rethinking how we do higher education. And I love that. Like I want innovation there. But I really believe in the power of education. And I think that for so many people like holds the key. I think in our audience, unfortunately, we see a lot of people who get master's degrees and then don't get paid enough to cover them. They're like encouraged and incentivized to get graduate degrees, but then have debt burden to cover the difference. So that's, I think a dangerous space, but I really believe in the power of education. So moving here and getting the education of like being surrounded by people who are thinking in different ways than I had experienced, and just education in general.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. You've been able to apply it, right, with the beans and everything that you've done. So totally makes sense. And, as you said, there's this narrative of, is it worth it? And I think for most people, it probably is, right? But hopefully we work a lot of the student debt issues and all kinds of stuff, which is a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother conversation.
We don't have time for. Melissa, I really appreciate you sitting down. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience? Any kind of final words? And then how can people connect with you and find the beans outside of this conversation?
Yeah. So first connect with me and find the beans. So you can drop me an email, melissa@thebeans.io. You can find the beans on the App Store. Or you can get it on mobile web, but only through our partnerships. So if you are yourself working in one of the kinds of industries we described, so in the caring class, or if you're responsible for people in the caring class, definitely get in touch. We just started a partnership with effectively the largest employer of teachers in the country, one of the largest employers overall in the country. And we'd love to serve many more people in the caring class. So teachers, nonprofit, government, and healthcare workers. So send me an email. That's melissa@thebeans.io. And then final parting words. I think that the core of our conversation, William, is about this like evolution in how people are relating to their finances. And I think that the parting words for whoever needs to hear this out there, and we talk about this a lot with our community, is like your point of view about money was baked while you were very, very young. Like this happened when you were very young. It's your community, it's your family, it's the television that you watched, it's your church, all of those things, developed your point of view about finances. And if you don't like it, you can do something differently, right? And that's the really exciting thing, is you can move in a different direction. But it's really powerful to like look around and name what you grew up in financially. And for some that we serve, that can be a lot of scarcity. For some, I would guess in this audience, it could be a lot of shame, or it could be a lot of control, or it could be a lot of things, right? But you get to choose. And so that's a thing that I find really exciting. But yeah, think about it. Name what you grew up in financially, and choose to go where you want to go, because you definitely can make progress.
Love that. It's great. Actionable words, wisdom, and actionable, which I love. So thank you so much for sitting down, Melissa.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, William.
On your way out, please share the podcast with others. It's the only way that the community grows and others hear these incredible stories from entrepreneurs and top performers. And of course, pound that subscribe button so you get notified when episodes drop every Friday. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Have a very profitable day.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying I'll never leave.